Yo everyone, sorry for the late video this week, but I've been pretty busy, but regardless anyway, we've got a massive card to look forward to this weekend. UFC 314 Volkanovski versus Lopes takes place in a few days time, and this card is absolutely stacked. Solid fights from top to bottom, and I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say, I can't wait for that main event. But before we even get into my predictions and breakdown for this card, I want to be fully transparent, because I do talk about my prediction and my prediction results, bet results for the previous week every single time I make a new prediction video. So let's go back a little bit to the last card quickly, which was UFC Fight Night Emmett vs Murphy. The subscribers and me got the main event pick correct, but that's really where the luck ended. I had terrible luck with bets and predictions overall, and I ended up losing about 3.7 units out of 6 I outlaid for the card. It's not the absolute worst case scenario, but we are looking to come back and win big this weekend, so stay tuned for the betting guide that will come out in a couple days time. Please put in the comments below as well what your best bet is for this card for your chance to be the subscribers bet of the week and make it into the betting guide as an addition to the bets for this card. If you do end up liking the video as well, please leave a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments below to show your support. As always, I'll be starting with the prelims and working my way all the way to the main event. Timestamps are in the description and the comment section below if you want to skip to any fight in particular. We're going to be starting with the first fight of the card, which is Nora Cornolle versus Hailey Cowan. And another thing I want to say before hopping into this fight, I hope I don't jinx it, guys, but we've had so many fights in a row pull out of UFC main cards, and I'm really hoping it doesn't happen on this card because every single fight I'm looking forward to. So please, fighters, stay healthy, guys. Anyways, onto the fight with Nora Cornolle versus Hailey Cowan. I think this should be a relatively easy pick and an easy fight for Nora Cornolle. Nora Cornolle actually is pretty solid and has a lot of pretty solid wins. Wins I rate pretty highly, like a win over Jocelyn Edwards is pretty good, and a finish over Melissa Mullins by KO as well. I feel like that's pretty good. Those are pretty good wins, pretty solid performances as well. And I know she's coming off a loss recently, but it is a loss to Jacqueline Cavalcanti, and it's by split decision too, and she is super good for the bantamweight division, so that loss isn't the worst one to have on your record in my opinion. Hailey Cowan, on the other hand, hasn't looked the best in her fights. She's lost to Jamie Lynn Horth recently as well. She looks pretty stiff overall, pretty slow in my opinion, and I would almost feel good about putting this in my confident picks list as well, but after Vanessa Demopoulos lost to Talita Alencar, I'm feeling just a little bit less confident when picking WMMA fights, honestly. I think I'll be sticking to putting them into my parlays to go the distance, but regardless, Nora Cornolle should win this fight, and I might put something on that potentially if I convince myself before the betting guide comes out. So moving on to the next fight of the card, Tresean Gore versus Marco Tulio. Interesting fight, but I would say I do agree with the odds. I think that Marco Tulio is a pretty solid and pretty dangerous striker. Better all round in that department than Tresean Gore, and he should be able to put Tresean Gore away on the feet early if he just keeps his distance and keeps this on the feet. I do worry though, since it does look like Tresean Gore likes to initiate his fights by shooting immediately upon the starting bell. It's very similar to if you've seen Jailton Almeida's habit of he likes to throw that flying knee into the double leg. So for my plan for Marco Tulio would be try to avoid that, try to avoid the wrestling, avoid the guillotine of Tresean Gore because he's got a pretty good guillotine. He seems to snatch it up pretty much in all of his fights, and you should win this fight relatively easily. So I am going to put Marco Tulio in my confident picks list as well. Relatively confident in him to get this one done. He should get this one done by KO. Moving on to Sumudaerji versus Mitch Raposo, and this is a very, very tricky fight to predict, honestly, and you would probably think that wouldn't be the case since the odds have Sumudaerji as a moderate favorite in this matchup, but Mitch Raposo really does have some pretty solid skills. He's got some solid boxing, he's got good power, he has the wrestling background, he has pretty solid entries on his takedowns too, and I just do think that he got a little unlucky to verse Andre Lima in his UFC debut, but I remember he did take the chance and took that fight on short notice. It was on like a week's notice, and Andre Lima was meant to verse someone else at that time, but they pulled out. To talk a little bit about Sumudaerji though now, he is very solid. He's also pretty dangerous when he's on the move in his striking. He's just so rangy, man. He's pretty tall for the division. It makes him a tough opponent for a lot of dudes. but I don't think Sumudaerji is as good as Andre Lima, and Mitch Raposo had his moments and ended up catching Andre Lima with a couple of crispy boxing combinations in that fight. So Sumudaerji is not that great when he's exiting the pocket either. He's not that great defensively in general, in my opinion. He's an all-or-nothing sort of offensive type fighter. He's got good footwork. He does like to fight on the outside. He's got good volume. But I do think that Mitch Raposo actually has the tools to win this fight, and I do think I actually am going to pick him as a pretty moderate-sized underdog to get this one done. I'm not going to say by finish, though, but I could see it happening, especially if he does implement the wrestling and use that wrestling in this fight. Mitch Raposo is the pick. First underdog of the card, guys. Moving on to Sedriques Dumas versus Michal Oleksiejczuk. Tough fight to predict here as well. But if I had to favor one fighter in particular, I'd probably favor Michal Oleksiejczuk because of his finishing ability on the feet and his superior striking game. I think that Sedriques Dumas has shown a lot of improvement in his game, especially in his last few fights, of course, excluding the loss to Zoltan Ruzaboyev. But in his last few fights, like against Dennis Tululin, I believe it was, Abu Zaitar, and Cody Brundage, the guy has really improved a lot, especially in his grappling, which he seems to be utilizing a lot more in his fights as of recent. And I do think Michal Oleksiejczuk, though, is pretty decent defensively on the ground. He would, of course, love to keep it striking where he does his best work, but the guy can tough out a lot of positions on the ground and keep himself relatively safe in someone's guard from bottom position. Even in that fight with Kevin Holland, he hurt Kevin bad, and although he got caught in an armbar, the dude is tough beyond belief and never tapped even after his arm was snapped in that fight, guys. I don't know, guys. I just don't know if Sedriques Dumas has the same level of success he has had recently with an opponent like Michal Oleksiejczuk. The dude has been fighting a lot of tough competition recently, and Sedriques Dumas has not been consistently fighting at the same level as of right now. I'm going to say Michal Oleksiejczuk wins this fight, most likely by KO in the first or second round as well. I really will be watching to see how he handles the wrestling of Sedriques Dumas in this fight. Moving on to Darren Elkins versus Julian Erosa, and alrighty guys, I don't know about you guys, but I don't agree with the odds. I do think Julian Erosa should be the favorite, and I do think he wins this fight the majority of the time, but Darren Elkins is super tough to finish, man. The dude always seems to survive really bad finishing sequences and submission attempts on top of that, and he's just got the grit to not only survive, but he just keeps it trucking, guys. He just keeps it going, and he comes back in these fights to win them. And I just thought I'd mention all this, because if anyone likes to jump on moderate-sized underdogs for bets, honestly, I don't think it's that much of a long shot to think that Darren Elkins survives early to come out on top as the winner by the end of the fight by grinding out Julian Erosa, because others have done that before, especially with his wrestling. That would be the main way he would win this fight. But with all said and done, guys, I'd be surprised if Julian Erosa wouldn't be able to get the finish over Darren Elkins in this fight. I reckon he probably hurts him on the feet and then finishes him with ground and pound or latches up a submission win. The dude's pretty good at latching up the submission. He is the better, more dangerous striker, and that's why I will be favoring him. He isn't the top level or anywhere near the top level for the featherweight division, and he isn't the best defensively, but I do think he should be good enough to beat an older Darren Elkins in this fight. And I would be surprised if Darren Elkins came back and won this fight. That's the pick, guys. Decent underdog in Darren Elkins to pick there. Moving on to Jim Miller versus Chase Hooper. And man, they are serving up Jim Miller right now to Chase Hooper. And I am on the Chase Hooper hype train right now for this fight. I think he wins this fight. I think he wins by sub most of the time. I reckon maybe even like a Das choke if I had to get really specific. He surprised me a lot throughout his career. The kid is only 25 years old. He's improved a lot in his striking for a predominant BJJ guy, and he's proven and shown that improvement with his statement win over Vyacheslav Borshev. He dropped him in that fight. He dominated him on the ground for 2 whole rounds, and then he got the submission. I really don't know whether UFC gave him Clay Guida after that fight as well. That was a really ridiculous matchmaking to me. That fight never should have happened. I knew he was going to smoke Clay Guida in that fight. Clay Guida didn't deserve that either. But to cut the story short, guys, I love Jim Miller. I think he's fantastic. He's an absolute dog in the octagon. I picked him to win as a pretty solid underdog when he was up against Damon Jackson in his last fight. And I thought he would win by sub in that fight, and he did as well. The guy is a finisher through and through, but I just don't know if all of that is enough to get through Chase Hooper at this point in Chase Hooper's career and at this point in Jim Miller's career, especially with the grappling of Hooper. This is going to be a rough one, man. Chase Hooper is the pick, either ground and pound or submission win. If it's a submission, I'm hoping by Dash choke if it's specific. So confident picks list addition for that fight too. Chase Hooper is added to that. Moving on to Xiaonan versus Virna Jandiroba. And I will say this about this fight. I'm going to pick Virna Jandiroba here, guys. And I'm going to get that pick out of the way straight away. I think she most likely gets the submission here as well. And I'll be pretty bloody annoyed if I lose another pick against Xiaonan, since I did pick Xiaonan to lose her last fight against Tabitha Ricci. And that's just because she's shown that she can be out-grappled in her fights, and she's shown she can be taken down by some pretty solid grapplers in the division. But in hindsight, I think that pick was pretty bad because Tabitha Ricci is just not on that level and doesn't shoot as many takedowns and doesn't shoot them well either as you would like. I do wish Virna Jandiroba would set up her takedowns a little more though, especially with her striking, but even saying that, she is at a pretty high level with her grappling. I think she's a step above a lot of these girls in the grappling department in the division, so I do think she will be able to take Xiaonan down and most likely submit her in this fight. If she doesn't take her down, she loses this fight. Simple as that. So if anyone thinks she won't get her down to the ground, Xiaonan would be a slam dunk bet for you, but I do think she gets taken down in my opinion. That's my reasoning for this pick. It's pretty black and white here. Moving on to Dan Ige versus Sean Woodson. Sick fight, guys. Sean Woodson has really been surprising me with how good he has been looking lately. I think I have underestimated him a little too much for a little too long, and now is the time I should be jumping on a little bit of that hype train here, even though this fight is relatively dangerous for him against Ige. But the dude is just so rangy. 6'2" in the featherweight division. He's looked good on the feet against pretty much all of his opponents. He's got knockout power as well, which is just massive for a lanky and rangy fighter. And he has pretty solid output numbers too, and that's probably what's going to be the difference maker in this fight, honestly. I think that Dan Ige is a hard dude to finish. He has been rocked before, but his recovery is pretty solid. He does lack a little bit of output and can lose rounds to dude with better activity, especially those who keep a distance and don't engage him in the brawl type of fight as well. So with all that said and done, I'm going to say since Dan Ige is hard to finish and that Sean Woodson is likely to outdo him in the striking and the output department in this fight, I think Sean Woodson by decision win is the most likely outcome for this fight. Sean will need to stay safe from the big shots of Ige, but I can't keep underestimating Sean Woodson, man. He's solid, and I think he can get this one done. I'm moving on to the main card now. Nikita Krylov versus Dominick Reyes. And this is how you start off a main card, guys. Great matchup here. I feel like a lot of people don't see Nikita Krylov fight since he's been out for around 2 years now, and he fights pretty sporadically, but the dude has fought the who's who of the division. He's won and lost some close fights in his career, but he does have a lot of KOs and subs under his belt too. Dominick Reyes has been making a resurgence recently though, with his 2 KO wins in a row against Dustin Jacoby and Anthony Smith. He's been looking very solid, and I'm hopeful he can continue keeping that solid mindset since he was just so close to becoming the light heavyweight champ, guys. He versed John Jones a few years ago now. I think it was around, how many years? 5-6 years ago. And I believe he did win that fight, but he just didn't get the nod from the judges, guys. I'm seeing a lot of people making statements, though, regarding Nikita Krylov, which I agree with, which is the statements include he might be one of the most unknown and underrated light heavyweights in the division. And like I said, I completely agree with that statement. The dude is insanely talented as a grappler. He can snatch up submissions from anywhere. He's always looking to finish a fight. Even on the feet where the guy isn't his best, the dude is quite powerful and dangerous as a striker. But here's where I'm going to make my own point and vent my own opinion here. I don't like how Nikita Krylov has been out for so long. I think a lot of people are overestimating Krylov's striking ability. The guy is pretty reckless and isn't the technician that people are making him out to be. At least this is in my opinion, guys. He also has struggled with, as far as what I've seen in his fights, watching all of his fight tape, he's struggled with a lot of good strikers that have solid grappling and solid takedown defense. He's lost against Jan Blachowicz, he's lost against Magomed Ankalaev, Glover Teixeira, Misha Serkinov, if you don't know who Misha Serkinov is, and he, like a bunch of the best light heavyweights, has also fallen victim to the great Paul Craig's triangle. I don't really blame him for that loss since Paul Craig has just gotten so many dudes with that, especially high level dudes. He's gotten Magomed Ankalaev with that, so you know he's got a good triangle. But still, guys, historically, throughout his career, he's done very poorly against this sort of matchup. And unless he catches Dominick Reyes on the feet and puts him away, which could certainly happen, this is light heavyweight, guys. This is the light heavyweight division. They're powerful dudes. I just think that Dominick Reyes is a relatively bad matchup for Krylov, and he's got fantastic takedown defense. He's pretty technical on the feet. He's got great footwork. He fights well on the back foot, under pressure as well, and he's got pretty solid speed and power. The only thing discouraging a lot of people, and myself a little bit, will be the worry about his chin and the ability to take shots in general. But from a technical standpoint, I feel like I should go with him to get this one done as the underdog, probably by KO or decision as well. So that's going to be my pick, guys. I'm locking in Dominick Reyes as the underdog. I'm moving on to Yair Rodriguez versus Patricio Pitbull. Now, if this was only Patricio Pitbull from like 6 years ago, man, it would have been fantastic to see a guy like that come into the UFC at that age as well. But he is 37 years old. He's coming off a win, but also coming off a pretty brutal loss in 2023 by KO to Chihiro, I think it was Chihiro Suzuki, and it was at Ryzen as well. It was a pretty bad KO. And this just makes it hard for me to see him beating Yair Rodriguez with all that going on. I'm not going to say he can't do it. The guy is dangerous everywhere. He's got a lot of submissions and a lot of KOs on his record, but the guy has not been looking as good the older he has got. I watched a lot of his fights and a few of his recent fights as well, just as like a refresher for this prediction video, and he just seems a little too tentative for me, guys. And even with his last win over Jeremy Kennedy, I honestly thought he looked pretty bad in that fight overall, and he got hurt by Jeremy Kennedy too in that fight. I think it was in the 3rd round, before he made the reversal and finished Kennedy in the same round, in that 3rd round. I think a lot of guys at the top of the featherweight division in the UFC, including Yair, will finish Kennedy in the 1st or 2nd round easily too, and I don't think they make it look close, guys. I really do think that Pitbull's level has dropped with his age quite a lot. The guy is a legend. He's still solid overall. I think he's still pretty high level, but I don't think he's competitive enough to be anywhere near UFC gold at this point in his career. I'm going to say that because of how tentative he is and how safe Pitbull seems to play it, Yair is most likely going to win this fight by like 30-27, 29-28 on the judges' scorecards, but I could potentially see a finish as well by KO. I'm not really going to bet on this fight though, since Pitbull is still quite skilled, and Yair has been known to crumble a little bit when he meets some solid resistance to his initial offense, like in his Brian Ortega fight, but still, Yair Rodriguez is my pick for this fight. I'm moving on to the feature fight of the card, and a lot of people are saying this is their people's main event as well. Bryce Mitchell versus Gene Silva, one of the most anticipated and built-up fights on this card. I can't wait for this fight to go down, and I just can't wait for this whole fight card to go down, to be honest with you guys. And something I will start this prediction off with is that I think Bryce shouldn't be this much of an underdog. Honestly, I think that's a pretty big mistake, and the odds should be a lot closer. Bryce has looked pretty solid, and I really do think this is based off of that loss to Josh Emmett by KO. But you guys got to remember one thing. Before that fight, Bryce had only lost to Ilia Topuria. He'd beaten a lot of top guys in the UFC like Andre Fili, Edson Barbosa, and Dan Ige, and he beat them all pretty dominantly with his grappling as well for the most part. You know, Gene Silva is fantastic on the feet. There's no doubt in my mind that if this does stay standing, he will be able to get the KO, TKO in this fight, no questions asked. But I have seen Gene Silva be taken down by lesser grapplers than Bryce in his career. And the only one that I can really even reference is in the UFC is Charles Jourdain, and he was able to get Gene Silva down like 2 times, 3 times, and he wasn't able to keep him down fully, but he was able to get good position over him and get him down that many times. And Charles Jourdain isn't even really known for his grappling. He's a predominant striker. Whereas Bryce might be one of the best pure grapplers in the division, at least top 5 in my opinion as well. And that's what has me most worried for Gene Silva going into this fight. I do really think I will pick Gene Silva still, just because at the end of the day, his takedown defense is decent and his ability to get up isn't absolutely terrible as well. And you would think he would be drilling relentlessly not to get taken down, and he would be practicing his takedown defense for Bryce's favorite takedowns, which seem to be like the head on outside takedown, run the pipe, single leg and double legs. So I will put my faith in Gene Silva in this fight to win by KO as well. But if he gets taken down in this fight, guys, there is going to be a whole lot of Bryce Mitchell bet people that are going to be very happy. And I think if Bryce Mitchell gets consistent takedowns in this fight, he probably finishes Gene Silva 2 by submission. That's how much I think Bryce Mitchell is being overlooked in this fight. I think he can get a sub if he secures that takedown a lot and tires out Silva. But anyways, guys, this is going to be a relatively close fight to pick. Gene Silva by KO is what I'm thinking and is what I'm settling on, but I might not even put this in my bets at all. But if I do, it'd probably be like some sort of prop or something for Bryce or Gene. We're moving on to the co-main event of the card, Michael Chandler versus Paddy Pimblett. Now, I've got a lot to say for this pick. This fight is just that interesting. It's super interesting as a matchup. And the thing that is specifically interesting about Michael Chandler in this matchup is that he always seems to make these fights close on paper with pretty much any fighter he's been matched up with at the top of the division, despite finding a way to lose almost every one of these fights at the top of the division. But man, regardless of his losses, Michael Chandler just makes it so tempting to pick him to win each and every time just because of all his skills and his attributes. He's literally like the perfect fighter you would build for yourself, probably excluding the poor fight IQ and maybe his cheating as well. But he's an underdog in this matchup too, which is understandable because of the streak Paddy Pimblett's on. But I honestly think he might be able to pull this one off and get a KO here. I think Paddy has not fixed his defense at all when it comes to tucking his chin or even working his defense with his hands. He's improved in his offensive striking and he's showcased he can look pretty solid in some technical exchanges when he's trying to go tit for tat. But he still is lacking defensively, and he just lacks defense, especially in the pocket, and that's what could cost him in this fight with Chandler. Another thing I want to say about Paddy's striking is that he isn't super technical with his hands. If you watch where he does his best work, it is by setting up his hands with his kicks. Whether he does it with low kicks or high kicks, he relies a lot on his kicking game, and that worries me since this fight will probably be fought in the close range, since Chandler will probably close the distance, and that really nullifies the kicking game. And something else I keep hearing people say about Paddy Pimblett is that he's got great grappling, and I do agree that he does, but the part I don't necessarily agree with is the idea that Chandler's was taken down by Oliveira many times in their second fight, and Pimblett should be able to do the same thing, but relatively easier, and I just don't agree with that at all. It's true that I think Paddy Pimblett has some of the best BJJ in the division right now. Honestly, he might be like top 3, top 5, and that's no joke. He's extremely skilled. Once he starts chucking up subs, he can chain submissions as well, but I just don't know about his wrestling since he hasn't used it very much inside the UFC. The guy fights most of his fights on the feet, and if he does get the fights to the ground, it's because someone shot on him, or he was able to get the clinch position, was able to snatch up something from there. Chandler's just hard to submit as well. I don't care what anyone says. He was hard to submit, and although he lost by submission to Dustin Poirier, that submission came after Dustin hurt him pretty bad in that fight. And Chandler looks solid in Charles Oliveira's guard as well in their first fight, and he was just throwing ground and pound and was even able to reverse position in that fight when he was in a full body triangle. So I don't think he's going to be relatively easy to submit in this fight for Paddy Pimblett. And I do think this fight is going to be relatively close overall, but I will edge the chances to win closer to Michael Chandler just because it's hard for me to see Paddy Pimblett hurting Michael Chandler in this fight. And although he has taken damage in this fight and has been put away by Olives, Olives hits hard, man, and he's got underrated power. I'm going to edge this one to Michael Chandler, locking that pick in now. I think he catches him in this fight, probably wins by KO. And that's it for my co-main event pick, and we can move on to the main event of the evening, and the fight I think most people are most excited for, Alexander Volkanovski versus Diego Lopes. This is an incredible fight, guys. This is one of the biggest fights you could make, and this is not just a legacy fight for both fighters, but this is a massive, massive legacy fight for both fighters. It's not just a legacy fight, it's a massive, massive, massive legacy fight for both fighters, guys. If Volkanovski wins, he would become a 2-time featherweight champion. He would have all the title wins and defenses he has, plus this one. He would become the oldest featherweight champion in history. Diego Lopes, on the other hand, would become one of the few featherweight champions in history and would get a win over the arguable best featherweight in history, guys, under his belt. This is insanely massive, with the biggest stakes you could think of, and as a fan, I wouldn't want it any other way. You guys voted for it as well. Alexander Volkanovski will get this one done, according to you guys as well, in the polls. I put it up for this main event, and it is quite skewed towards him as well, too. It wasn't even close. And I'll tell you something, guys. I'm worried for Volk. Through his title reign, He's become one of my favorite fighters ever. If you don't know who my favorite fighter is, it is Max Holloway, but Yuri Prochazka has been taking over that spot with his insanity. They're both my favorite fighters right now of all time. But what I'm trying to say is that Volk beat my favorite fighter 3 times, but he has won over my respect, my admiration, and has his spot with me as a massive fan now. I also love Diego Lopes as well. I followed his fights along very carefully since his debut, and I knew he was going to be exciting after his fight with Movsar Evloev. He seems very genuine. He's always put on an insane performance. He's an absolute animal, and he's willing to fight anyone, anytime, no matter the circumstance. He fought Dan Ige on less than a day's notice. I think it was a few hours' notice after doing 3 separate weight cuts just for the fight to be at a catch weight, and he still won that fight. Regardless of what happens here, I'm going to be happy for one and sad for another. Mentally for me, however, the worst outcome would be seeing Volk get flatline KO'd, but that's just for me personally. I'm sure a lot of people feel the same. But I'm going to tell you this right now, guys. I gotta back my boy, Alexander the Great Volkanovski, to get this one done in a y'all musta forgot performance. And the reason I've made this decision, and I have agreed with the subscribers poll as well, is that Volk is just so skilled, guys. I have faith in him to be able to navigate a tough matchup against a dangerous opponent. And as long as that fighter's name isn't Ilia Topuria, I think he can win. And Volk historically has done extremely well against taller fighters, and he tends to fight with a lot less openings against taller fighters. Only a few opponents have given Volk some trouble on the feet, and they were similar height with him. Like Ilia Topuria comes to mind, Aldo comes to mind. Chad Mendes also did alright against Volk at points. I think he hurt Volk in his fight as well. And I'm going to say it, guys, if Volk gets this fight out of the first and second round, after a very high-paced start, he probably TKOs Diego Lopes in the later rounds of this fight, since Diego Lopes has always slowed down massively in output and ends up having to fight on the back foot a lot, which sort of ends up self-nullifying himself, like with his style that gives him success, which is bulldozing forward and throwing bombs. Diego Lopes, by KO in round 1, round 2, that's probably the prop I would go for if you're a Diego Lopes bettor here. Just because I feel like if it does go beyond that point, it's really hard for me to imagine him putting Volk away, like having Volk lose, especially if he didn't get hurt or take much damage in the early rounds of this fight. And that's how technical Volk is, guys. Everywhere the game can go, he's extremely technical. I would worry a little for Volk if he decided to work in his takedowns and ground and pound game, since Diego's just so good off his back. But then again, the guy's extremely hard to submit, and he can tough out a lot of submissions and reverse a lot of positions, like he showcased in his fight with Islam Makhachev and Brian Ortega. So I guess, guys, that is my prediction for this fight. Volk by decision win or late rounds TKO. It would be great to see Volk with the gold around his waist once again, and I do think he can achieve that dream here. Again, guys, that's it for my main event pick, and that's it for my full card predictions and breakdown for UFC 314, Volkanovski versus Lopes. If you guys have any thoughts or any questions for me regarding the card, feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll do my best to respond to every single comment left in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you guys next time.